Okay, beautiful. I want to welcome you to today's training. And today we have just chapter 4 of the ethical and responsible sourcing to handle. And if we continue with the pace that we have been moving on with, we should be able to cover up and have everything done. After today's training, we would not end the training. We would immediately move into revision. And in the revision, I will treat exam specific, which I will open you up to things that you would be expecting for the exam proper, like areas that questions would be asked, what kind of questions, and thereafter we will move on into responding to questions and putting answers to them. We will treat between 50 to 60 questions before your exams. And I am sure if we stick to this plan, we would be very, very much successful and you would do very, very well. So this is where I would need you to concentrate and ensure that you follow up the plan. Now, one thing I want to advise you, the time is pretty short. So it would be advisable that you follow up with your study. Like if you would want to take time off from the office, you take it off so you can concentrate and go back and front, back and front, back and front. Okay? Do not only listen to the video, also pick the questions, because the questions would radiate or accelerate your learning. So ensure that you have that done. So today, chapter 4 is what we're going to be looking at. Here now we will understand ethical and responsible sourcing. Okay, so by the end of this chapter, you would understand more about responsibilities of a procurement professional in terms of ethical and responsible sourcing. So this chapter is the body of the concept of ethical and responsible sourcing. Not that this chapter single-handedly will supply majority of the exam questions, no, but from this chapter, we should be able to learn much of ethical and responsible sourcing. Yes. The network is pretty slow. The slides are delaying to move, but it's still okay. We are patient enough to wait for it to load. So now the subheading which I have here is for us to describe the impact of international ethical standards on procurement and supply. That is to say, globally, the procurement and supply international standards in various organizations, in various nations can impact on the way we do out our procurement and supply businesses locally. Now, in this area, there are two important principles that can actually influence the way we conduct our business. So ethical responsibility and sustainable practice. These are two things that you must be conversant with when we talk about procurement and supply being impacted by international and ethical standard. So supply chains most times are vulnerable to the influence of a number of unethical things. And if you don't know them, you wouldn't know when they are already influencing the business that you are embarking on. Some things like corruption, bribery can actually influence the way we carry out our procurement functions. So we must know when they are about to impact or influence the way we do business. Is that clear?
Yes, it's clear.
Okay, I'm making my notes more clearer so you can, even when you're looking at it, you can understand it. Yeah. So through the use of supplier due diligence, pre-assessment, and auditing, the procurement professional would be able to monitor their suppliers in different ways. So how do you monitor your supplier? If I may ask you, you would say, by carrying out my due diligence, by pre-assessing them, and by auditing what they have done. Okay? So when we talk about things that can actually influence procurement and supply from the international front, the unethical standards that can influence the procurement and supply from the international front, we cannot continue without first of all capturing the impact of corruption, without talking about modern slavery, without talking about bribery, without talking about fraud, without talking about human rights violation. So that is to note that in various ways, these terms or these practices may want to influence the way we do things. Now, number one here is cultural consideration with corruption. And I'm saying that is one of the biggest issues with all types of corruption, where individuals may try to defend the use of cultural relativism. That is to say that in our land, in our country, in our land or in our country, we believe that handing money over of so and so amounts to allow you to do business in there is natural, is not corruption. You may, when you leave your country and step into some countries, what you call corruption in your country may not be corruption in other countries. They may want to say that. But as a procurement professional, you should know that corruption should be corruption. Bribery should be bribery anywhere in the world, based on the international standard that you're going to be coming up with. So cultural relativism is where they try to apply their own laws, their own principles and beliefs to a situation. This means that corruption is treated and accepted differently across different cultures, and that individuals may be accused of being wrong for following their own values when challenging corruption. Maybe you move into Australia and you are challenging corruption. How the Australians, if their ethical corruption standard is very low, they could have been looking at you somehow and be saying, does she really know what she's talking about? This is not corruption. This is just to accelerate business. It's a normal thing that we do here. It's not an offense. So when you hear such things, you know cultural relativism is coming into play. Where cultural relativism is somebody trying to use their own laws to override the way you should believe and the way you should do business, their own unethical, uncoordinated, you just name it, laws to influence the way you should do business. So a common example of this cover-up would facilitate payment. In some areas, it's actually considered to be called a cultural norm to hand money over to somebody to give you a preferential treatment, to facilitate maybe your document over the other person. But in some areas, these norms may not be acceptable. Yeah, that may not be acceptable by some nations and some non-governmental organizations. The anti-corruption legislation in the US, like the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, has actually been in place since 1977, but mostly this is relating to practices of how we should do business as regards two countries. Okay, so there are specific laws that captures these corruption acts and the anti-corruption acts and the way we should do business. One is the UK Bribery Act of 2010. All of them has verbiages or maybe line items that stipulates how businesses should be done as against bribery and corruption. And in them, you may find certain guidance on how to prevent yourself against bribery or being bribed. Now, what are the most popular types of corruption? Bribery and fraud. They are the most popular types of corruption. A bribery could be financial, maybe a favor, maybe a threat, a company shares, or any number of other things, as long as it is of value to the recipient. And sometimes bribery may go beyond the names in which we call it. So to make them sound so friendly, to make them, people may want to, organize them in a way, use words to represent them in a way that will make them appealing, that will not look like bribery. So therefore, someone may feel they are ethically accepted. When somebody will say it's a facilitation payment or a grease payment. So you should know whatever the payment is called, it still meets the definition of a bribe and would be considered as one. Is that clear? So one of the greatest concerns is that it is a barrier to fair competition. Bribery is a barrier to fair competition. So as a responsible procurement professional, what would you do? You reject all form of bribery.
Sure, yeah.
You must ensure that you protect your procurement team and all the employees in the organization as against it. You may come up with certain policies that may guide your employees on how to accept gift, what gift to accept. You come up with gift policies. Yeah.
Yes.
So when you come up with these policies will tell them, if peradventure a potential supplier is giving you above $20 before you accept it, or even if you have accepted it, report it to your manager and let it be documented that supplier A had given you so and so money. We are not against it, but ensure that you have it being reported. If the supplier is giving you $100 and above, report it to your district or your senior manager before you accept it. Because with this, we should be able to trace which supplier has the tendency to want to influence our buyers and our decision making. So we would know which supplier to take off and also to control our procurement processes. So That is about bribery. So you come up with procurement policies to do what? To save your organization against bribery. Now, the second one we talked about is the fraud. And that actually involves an entity, maybe an employee, unlawfully obtaining funds for their own benefit. Or somebody is trying to cover up misused funds, misused resources. Or somebody is trying to misuse resources because of the kind of power that they have. Maybe a particular fund allocated to them for certain businesses. They may likely want to divert it to something else. That is fraud. And most especially when they are diverting it to other activities that benefit themselves instead of the organization. But there are certain reasons that actually makes employees and individuals to commit fraud. One is perceived pressure. Maybe somebody is influencing them, threatening them. We will kidnap your son or your daughter if you do not release the contract to so and so person. Can you see that? That's an influence. That's a pressure that can make somebody want to cut corners. And that is why you must know what is happening. And whatever may be the reason, fraud is fraud.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's about that. The second one is perceived opportunity. Someone may look at fraud in the kind of way that this is my opportunity to make it big. This is my opportunity to earn so much and then resign and go and start my organization. Yeah. Different ways.
Yes, yeah.
And by so doing, the person would not start cutting corners, looting the organizational resources and diverting money to other things for personal gains and benefits. Number three is rationalization. That which you think or the organization is saying is fraudulent, to them, they have justification. They have, it's not fraud. It's just like I'm just being wise. I cannot be inside the water and salt will come and enter, the soap will enter my eye and I will not wash it off. I cannot put salt or sugar on my lip and you would say, I will not test it a little. They just use certain words to want to qualify it. So if I may ask, what are the forms fraud can take? There are many of them. When somebody gives you an advance fee to influence you, it's a fraud. That's what is called the corporate fraud, where you're using your company, someone is using an organization to fraud an individual or another organization. And then we have the identity fraud, where somebody is using another name or another face on a passport or certain other things. Then we have the individual fraud. That one is based on the individual, which doesn't fall under the previous categories.
Okay.
We also have cyber crimes. Cyber crimes are frauds too. And sometimes these cyber crimes are within the individual fraud. Even organizations too can commit cyber crime. One of the cyber crimes includes phishing. Right?
Right.
Phishing. Another one is account takeover. The other one is money mulling. and official request. Now let's explain them one by one. Phishing is when, for instance, a mail has been sent to somebody and for a particular link is there. If the link is being clicked, the person's financial account will be vulnerable and some certain login details and password may be compromised by clicking on that link, and the criminal somewhere can have access to the person's financial accounts, and thereon they cannot divert the person's money. Then account takeover is when someone is coming, even on Facebook, it happens, somebody can come and take over someone's account and the owner is not even in control of the account, is the criminal that is using it to defraud family members.
Yeah.
Money mulling. Certain times you see these criminals, when they have the money being siphoned and placed in certain accounts, they send it offshore or in certain areas into another man's account that is a culprit. Why the culprit, wherever he is, will withdraw the money and go and pay the money in another account and get his own cut from it. That is money mulling. Official request is when your manager is telling you that we are mandating you to do it, even if when you get to the country, ensure that the minister for petroleum is given so and so amount, even if it's against your company's policy, your manager is telling you do it. Can you see that fraud is official request?
Yes.
Yeah. So we must know when things come again.
Sorry. Can you just repeat the money mulling?
Money mulling, these criminals, they can, move money from certain accounts or from a particular country and pay it into somebody's account. Now that person will withdraw the money and take the money manually to go and lodge into the criminal's account. So they cannot trace the complete movement of the money electronically. Can you see that? There's a point where the money will be cashed out from the bank or from the system and repaid into another account somewhere.
Okay, clear.
Okay. So yeah, we've talked about bribery, we've talked about fraud as human, as part of the fraud, the acts that can, unethical standards that can influence procurement and supply. Also, human rights is there. When human rights are violated in certain areas, and the way we carry out procurement and supply services can be wrongly influenced. Because of this, the Universal Declaration Human Rights was adopted by the United Nations. You should know best, that's your area. In 1943. And also we have the CIPS Code of Conduct that states that procurement professionals who are members of CIPS should promote the eradication of human rights violation by learning about them. So how do? You have to learn about human rights violation so you can promote the awareness of it and how people would be able to fight them to stand still. So how do you do that? You do that by carrying out due diligence of the potential supplier. You look at the potential supplier and you look at the supply chain. Is it buying product from the wrong place, from the wrong seller? Is it buying product from a place where human rights are being violated? Or even the supplier himself, is the supplier enslaving people to work for them? I want you to discover that. You take appropriate remedy on such violation. So part of this human rights violation could be modern slavery. Now, from the analysis that CIPS gave us in 2016, they said that number of modern day slavery was estimated to be 40.3 million. Wow.
Yes.
40.3 million. That's huge.
Huge, yeah.
Yeah. So, but that reference was according to the International Labour Organization and Work Free Foundation of 2017. A procurement professional with modern slavery concerns could act in the following way. What are the ways? Carry out due diligence. Carry out due diligence checks for new and current suppliers. These are your examination questions, so you should be paying attention. Number two, okay. Check code of conduct documents provided by suppliers. Do they explicitly reject slavery? Because when you are carrying out your supplier selection process, they are supposed to submit their code of conduct. Now, when you lay your hands upon their code of conduct, immediately look for where they talk about slavery. If explicitly is being rejected there, for like the organization is saying that we kick against modern slavery and whatsoever, okay? So based in the UK, contact the modern slavery helpline for advice. That is for those that are in the United Kingdom. If things, you contact them in a place where you're not clear. Let them guide you on the terms and what modern slavery is all about if you're not too sure of what the supplier is doing. And always stay alert and look for the evidence of the indicators listed above, interacting with suppliers or visiting a supplier's premises unannounced. Okay. So when you get there, when you get to the organization, you introduce yourselves to the workers on the shop floor when visiting suppliers, and also have them to introduce themselves and ask them certain questions. That is to say, interact with them, tell them who you are, so you can learn from them. In as much as we have talked about things that are against ethical procurement and supply, there are other things that are in support of it. There are other things that can encourage them. And this brings us to the place of we identifying practices that supports ethical procurement. And number one is the application of the CIPS code of conduct. You must apply that. Ethical codes of practices, pre-qualification assessment and assessment criteria. We talked about coming up with the PQQ and also the pre-assessment, where we talked about the CATA's 10 C's. All those things are things that you must do to ensure that you are sourcing a supplier, contracting a supplier rather, that he's sustainable. Number 4 here is the due diligence on suppliers and the risk assessment. There are suppliers that you may go into dealings with. They transfer certain risk. If they are not competent, that is a risk of failure and a waste of fund, time, and every other resources for you. Okay? So let's move on to wanting to check them one by one. So you have to be resilient as a procurement professional. Be resilient, be confident, and also be clear. You must be clear. Specifically, you should know what is ethical and what is not accepted. What is unethical and what is not accepted. You are expected to first know their organizations and their organization's value. You are expected to know their policies. You're expected to be familiar with their processes and any requirements that the organization may have in place to support procurement or to support procurement activities. This may not be you knowing about the suppliers on premises alone, even your own organization. You should know about it. Yeah. So you must guide yourself with best practices within your profession. Okay. And ensure that you have the ability to use whatever tools that are available to you in order to understand more about the supplier. Can you see the kata tenses that we talked about can actually help us in knowing the supplier more. So looking at it, the application of the CIPS Code of Conduct. So the main benefit to following rules set out in the code is that you will have a better understanding of how to carry out ethical, effective business that meets the needs of your organization without negatively affecting the needs or rights of others. This is letting you understand that in as much as you want to meet your organizational strategic goals, you must not jeopardize the well-being of others because you want to achieve your goal. The secondary benefit of following the code is that it allows you to continue holding the CIPS membership. That is to say, if you are in violation of these laws, what would happen? Your license can be revoked. And we were taught that CIPS Code of Conduct comprises of 5 sections that outline what is required of you as a CIPS member.
Yes.
There are 5. And there are things for you to do to meet these requirements. And what are these code of conduct? Enhancing and protecting standing of profession, promotes the eradication of unethical business practices, maintain the highest standard of integrity in all business relationships. Yeah.
Yes.
Now, all these are things that you mustn't cram or maybe memorize to remember. No. When you read through the option, you know what is expected of you. What is expected of you is to protect and promote the body. So if somebody is telling you that you are expected to maintain the high standard of integrity in all business relationships, yeah, that is my right. You say, yeah, that is my name. That is my responsibility. Yes. So you mustn't want to cram me to know it. It's very easy. Now, let's talk about the ethical codes of practice. Developing an ethical code of practice allows the company to demonstrate its commitments to carrying out ethical business and rejecting corrupt practices. So while you sit down with your team members as professionals to come up with ethical code of practice, you know that all what we want to do in this organization as regards bribery and corruption, as regards frauds, are stipulated in this document. As you're putting it together, you're becoming more familiar. It is very important for the procurement function or the supply chain function in an organization to have this.
Okay, clear.
Okay, there are certain areas that we may want to implement this. We may want to implement it at the professional level. Even at the professional level, like procurement profession that we talked about, can you see that the CIPS submitted their own application of the CIPS Code of Conduct? The sector level, even the nation too would have, your country too would have theirs. Which one do you want to follow? All these ones, you pick one and then you follow the most stringent one. Even you as a professional, you may sit with your team to put together one for your organization. Pre-qualification and assessment criteria. When you sit down with your team to build certain ounces, certain measures of valuing, evaluating, appraising the suppliers, that shows that you would know when the supplier is becoming most reliable for you to deal with or for you to contract. Due diligence is one way. Due diligence is when you go into the market and then you are understanding or understudying the supplier. You are asking questions about the supplier, finding out about their supply chain, trying to know how they do business, who is working for them and who they are working for, where they are getting their money and how they are using their money. So by carrying out effective due diligence, you would be able to improve your understanding of your supplier's quality. You would be able to improve your understanding of your supplier's performance and their ethical makeups.
Yeah.
If there is any risk hidden, you would be able to, put a light on it and know that, oh, wow, this is a red flag for us. Let's either avoid it. Let's either mitigate it. Let's either transfer it. If in the worst case scenario that you may not want to continue with the organization, you avoid it by not doing that business with that organization and you pick the next organization. Due diligence is actually carried out by asking the supplier certain questions, asking them to provide you certain information. You may come up with a template and back it up in a way that you are requesting some certain document from them. And also you can carry out your due diligence by visiting their premises to see how their facilities are. You may want to sit in your office and go through their website and, to sniff out carrying out some kind of desktop assessment. That's called desktop assessment. Okay, some examples of common due diligence factors are first impression of the supplier, product or services, quality, background check, adverse media, criminal conviction, corrupt practices, financial performance. Look at you just keep looking for these things and looking at their financial performance, looking at if they have been indicted, they have been indicted with fraud, and you take a background check of them, you look at their quality. While you're doing this, you are assessing them to know if they are right for you. And when you have this, if there's any risky aspect of it, you have it recorded. You record it in a document called the risk register. And this register allows you to rank the risk furtherly. When you rank the risk, you may know it from the highest to the lowest level. Can we bear it? The risk register can aid you in coming up with decision of how you intend to do business with the buyer, the seller. Rather, am I to avoid them? Oh, if I cannot avoid them, let me put this and this in place. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So all this would help us to carry out procurement services ethically. you still would want to obtain certain information from them. When you ask them to supply their quotation, you ask them to tender. From what they have sent you, you may want to know how well they are doing. Yeah. Then when you're dealing with them, my dear, ensure that you have contractual clauses embedded in the contract terms and conditions that will restrict them from cutting corners, from carrying out business unethically. You may want to include key performance indicators. The key performance indicators are like the measures, okay, that you have planted in the contract. These measures could be measurement of waste sent to landfill, consumption of energy on an annual basis. You want to look at it and know, okay, how they are doing well in certain areas. Are they generating waste too much? How much are they generating? If they keep sending waste, generating waste, and yet they are still not sending much of the waste to landfill, that will tell you that, to landfill rather, that will tell you that maybe they are dumping their waste indiscriminately somewhere around the waterways, or they are burying them somewhere around the community. And you just would know how sustainable they are by looking at certain KPIs of how much weight they are generating and how much weight they are rightly dumping. When you monitor suppliers, your businesses with them would hardly have troubles. So you still have to monitor suppliers' performance. Here now you're looking at their ethical performance by auditing them. Okay?
Yes, okay.
So you will assess them by looking at the true value of what they do. Sometimes they have book value and so forth. They are not truthful with what they have written down for you to follow. So when you work with them, you look at their performance and you should be able to know if they are meeting up what they have said or not. By physically visiting the supplier's premises, we've talked this several times. The auditor is to make their own assessment of whether or not to believe the supplier operates in an ethical or sustainable manner. Audit, I'm saying audit can also be carried out internally. They could be generally ongoing or maybe occasional. So you just name them. They could be carried out in a number of ways, but they sure would guide you in ensuring that businesses are going well. Okay. So always remember that there are 3 key ways of ensuring that activities are ethically and sustainably undertaken. One, which I said is what? Monitoring suppliers' performance.
Yes.
That is one way to ensure that. It's an examination question for you. 2, encouraging dialogue with suppliers on process improvement. Yeah.
Yes.
So number 3 is what? Recommending remedial actions where appropriate.
Yes.
That is what you do. You recommend remedial options where appropriate. We said, let's reiterate it again. Number 1 is monitoring suppliers' performance. Number 2 is encouraging dialogue with suppliers on process improvement. As you're talking to them, you're trying to look for ways that they can have better processes. Maybe processes that can cut down the total waste they generate. While number 3, you're recommending remedial actions where appropriate. How do you recommend remedial actions? You must carry out the root cause analysis and come up with corrective action. You must take timely, effective, and direct action. You must come up with supplier development programs in as much as they are working with you. If you have certain innovation that you feel they are not conversant with, you may want to bring their personnel in-house and train them by encouraging them. Because even you, if they are good, you are good. If they are faulty, your supply chain is faulty. It may one way or the other sabotage your business. So supplier development programs are effective for maintaining relationship with a current supplier, as well as for helping them to improve performance. So when you do that, you will see that they can serve you better. And remember, you only do this for what? The strategic suppliers. Suppliers that you have strategic alliance with or co-destiny with.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So now let's talk about identifying and address potential conflict of interest. Most times frauds have conflict of interest, right? Bribery are conflicts of interest.
Yes.
Where personal benefits is playing down or conflicting with the common benefit of the organization. There are certain relationships that can cause conflict of interest. Somebody's partner, when the preferential treatment is given to somebody's partner, that is a conflict of interest. When somebody is favoring his wife or his husband in bidding, that is a conflict of interest. Somebody is favoring his current or his former business partners. It's a conflict of interest. And somebody is giving information or favoring shareholders in another company. Or you're favoring your friend. Or giving your children preferential treatment because they are part of the bidding process. That is a conflict of interest. You're leaking certain information to them in favor, in a way that it can put them ahead of the other suppliers. So there are certain ways also that we can prevent issues arising from perceived conflict of interest. How can we do that? We can do that by openly declaring it. Permit me to share this story with you. I was one of the project engineers in Brussels LNG. And at the time, when we were doing the contract formation of Brussels LNG in the early phase of the project, that project was about close to $50 billion. $50 billion. So when we're putting things together on the project, we had applicants, when the CVs came in, I had my elder brother's CV was there. And when we looked at it, He was qualified. So he was supposed to be called for an interview. And when he was called for an interview, I really desire that he gets that job. So what they did, they now placed him under the people that I would interview. Instead of going ahead with it, interviewing my elder brother and sending his name to the organization that he was among the successful ones, because of openly declaring, because of this clause, I had to tell the organization that among these applicants sent to me for interview, my elder brother is part of it. On the family side, that was not well with everybody. But yet, in the organization side, that was the right thing to do. So I had to inform them to move him to another group for the interview. And they did that. And I explained to my elder brother when he discovered that I was to interview him and later his name was moved. He said, why didn't I protest? So they can still leave him for me to interview. I said, yeah, I wanted that. But the organization has its own policy. If I go ahead interviewing you without notifying the organization, that is a violation of the company's policy. I'm expected to declare all conflict of interest. So that is how you identify and address potential conflict of interest. A conflict of interest register should be created. The date that the conflict of interest is raised should be placed against it. The name of the people the conflict of interest pertain to, details of their roles and terms. You have it written there. Details of the relationship between them and the reason the conflict of interest was raised should be placed in there too. The boundaries or the conditions to be set if the individuals in question should ever be asked to work together. It could be anything, but you ensure that, hello, are you asking?
Yes, no, I'm with you.
Are we flowing?
Sorry?
Are you understanding?
Sure, yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, I'm learning too. So now this brings us to a new section. Now in this section, we will contrast processes and practices that the organization could adopt to meet the requirements of corporate social responsibility. You know what corporate social responsibilities are? What we hold the community, what we hold the community that we are operating in, what we hold the society that we are operating in. For instance, if we are doing a business in a particular community, we have to give back to the community in certain areas, true or false?
True, yes.
That becomes our corporate social responsibility. If we are coming into Baghdad to operate in certain areas, we could give back to them by employing some of them. It's a corporate social responsibility. We may look at it and say, okay, if there is no water in this community, let's set up wells and give them pipe-borne water. If there are no good hospitals in the community, since we are making money from them, we should be able to give back to them in certain ways that can benefit and profit them.
Okay.
Okay. That is that. So to keep us in balance, there is a term that CIPS researched and came up with, and that is called the triple bottom line. The triple bottom line talks about profit, people, and planet. In as much as you want to make profit as a private sector organization, also think about the people. that you're going to be working with. And also ensure that you are not jeopardizing their present and their future because you want to make profit. And also the planet, talking about the environment. You don't want to deplete the environment because of the profit you are making. You have to ensure that you are making the environment more friendly and more habitable for the people, as you are making your profit. So this is the triple bottom line. It talks about 3 P's, PPP, profit, people, and planet. The planet is environment. So adopting sustainable practices, standards, and specification in the supply chain. We will look at it, considering the social impact of the organization's behavior. Expanding reporting framework to include ecological and social performance. We'll talk about designing procurement processes to deliver social outcomes as well as or as an alternative to economic measures of value. Defining organization value for money to include social outcomes. So under this section, we will look at this. So what is corporate social responsibility? It is the demonstration of ethical behaviors carried out by an organization. You hold them that you must carry out ethical behavior. So it recognizes that the organization has additional responsibilities for which it should be held accountable, in as much as you have the responsibility to generate money, revenue for shareholders. You still have additional resources in giving back to the society, maybe by keeping the society the way you met it, or maybe by helping the people to be more prosperous than the way you met them. So you should be accountable. So one of the best ways to display a strong commitment to the CSR, that's the corporate social responsibility, is an organization's understanding of sustainable development and the ways it applies this principle. That's the first place. You must understand sustainable development as regards the 3 strands of the triple bottom line we talked about. Sustainable development in supply chain are those that meet the requirement of the people, using them at this point in time, but also taking care of the negative things that could have impacted them now or in the future. And this is made up of 3 pillars: social, environment, and economic. So we have 3 pillars of sustainability. Remember the triple bottom line. The triple bottom line is also in accordance with the 3 pillars of sustainability. And the 3 pillars of sustainability is social, S for social, E for environment, and C for economic. What is the social? The social is about the social life of the people. The environment is the habitat where the people are living, where they are staying. Why the economic, the profit that you are generating. Can you see that?
Yes.
So you must have these 3 balance. That's why we call it, these are the 3 pillars of sustainability. When these 3 pillars are standing, sustainability can be placed on them carefully. So the triple bottom line is what? Profit, people, and planet. 3 pillars of sustainability is social, environment, and economic. Now, when you say you want to remember the 3 pillars of sustainability, just think about C, S-E-E-E. S-E-E. S for social, E for environmental, and the last E for economic. And economic could be likened to be your profit. The social could be likened to be your people. The environment could be likened to be the planet. So in the private sector, success depends on being profitable. and staff in this organization may be charged rather, not changed, charged. May be charged to save money while trying to maximize income to the company. The primary driver for many organizations, there are some that take a more philanthropical approach to business by incorporating the principles of CSR into their objectives or vision. This could be like the organization setting itself a target to improve its social and environmental impact, both inside and also outside of the organization. So that is that. So you use these two terms, the triple bottom line, to take care of sustainability, or you use the three pillars of sustainability to take care of sustainability. This should be your driving force. So you must be pushing through these three areas: profit, people, and planet, or social, economical, or environmental. When you have all these threes, you're meeting up on these areas, and every one of them is good. What's happening? You are doing business in the right and ethical way. So when an organization is aware of the benefit of sustainable practice, it may choose to implement standards that its workforce can follow to achieve sustainability. So your supply chain is one of the best benefits from sustainable practice. And it is one of the most vulnerable parts that may be impacted if things are not rightly placed. So we have the ISO 2400, that is 2017. This ISO 2400 talked about an international sustainable development standard specifically to cover the process of sustainable procurement. So when you read this ISO standard, you would see how procurement professionals are expected to carry out sustainable practices. So if you need approval in this area, this is the line document that your organization, sorry, the license that your organization would obtain from ISO body. And this document contributes 17 UN sustainable development goals. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
In summary, it talks about the provision of decent work and driving of economic growth, reducing inequality of supply chain, responsible production, supporting communities. Can you see that these are three, we're still within the three we talked about? Supporting communities is social, right?
Yes.
That one is about the people. Social is about the people. Reducing inequality of supply chain, that is still social.
Okay.
Economic growth is still the people. As you're dealing with them, you still want them to be better. So supporting communities could still also be looked at as environmental sustainability. So social impacts can be positive or negative. When you're carrying out businesses, you must look at the impact of your organization's behavior in the society. What are the health-related effects? Because I came in, is there division in the community? Because I stepped into the community, I started my business in this community. Am I causing unsustainable population influxes? That is, am I causing some criminals or maybe en route people to move into the community and start doing business there? There are certain times that when some organizations moves into certain areas, we see the adverse effect of certain kind of other businesses coming in. By citing some organizations in some areas, you see people coming up to set up prostitution houses. You see other people coming in to set up some drug houses. You see other people, criminals start harboring around that community because they feel they can find people to rob. Whereas when the community was without that company, they were as peaceful as anything. Is that clear?
Yes, it's clear.
So it depends. It is positive when you are attracting highly affluent or skilled people. Sometimes it's negative because of the cultural changes or the composition of the community changes. But the community would not ever remain the same. The way they do things would be changed and influenced in certain direction because you came.
Mm-hmm.
So you must be conversant with how you are affecting or you are influencing them. Yeah.
Yes.
Now, what is the organizational value for money? The organizational value for money must include the social outcome. That is why it's expected for the government to impose or offset or industrial participation requirements on foreign companies that it procures from. Now, talking about offset or industrial participation, offset is like when I'm coming into Iran to contract a particular manufacturer and I brought them into my country, Nigeria, and I'm giving them a bridge construction project. Then in the contract, I am mandating them to build school for us also. That from the profit they will make, they must build school for us. Or from the profit they will make, they should build hospital. Or from the profit they will make, they should also invest in certain areas of our economy. Can you see that that becomes an offset?
Yes.
That is a value for money. Outside the money we are spending, we are getting additional value. Aside we trying to build a bridge, we are still encouraging our economy to do well. So the use of labor. Now talking about some examples of offset categories that may be considered for use by some countries. Procurement of product or services. Investment into improving local infrastructure, building houses, improving conditions of roads, etc. Contribution or investment into research and development through sharing knowledge and potentially or intellectual property. Investments into improving local access to education for people of different age groups and background. So you are roping them to want to look at all these areas too, right? If they must come and do business,
yes,
in your terrain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we have certain benefits. When they come in like that, They support the local economy. They provide certain security of jobs. People cannot find jobs. The local workers may find things to do. My country's economy will blossom. That is what offsetting can do, or industrial participation can do for you. So when you mandate them like that, you know that they will meet up with their corporate social responsibility. Yeah.
Yeah, it's clear.
Mm-hmm. So, around the world, multinationals are facing certain challenges and certain criticism. And one of it is that when they establish a plant in a country and hire the local people, usually at low rates of pay, and subsequently, they will abandon them and the plant when there is an opportunity to establish a more economically and advantageous plant and workforce elsewhere in the world. No plan for the exiting, no exit strategy. They will just abandon the plant. And they do that a lot. So CIPS would say, if you're contracting a multinational to come and maybe do certain jobs in your country or in your community, you come up with an exit strategy where you may mandate them, even if they don't want to do business, let them systematically hand over. Let them train the country nationals to take over systematically. So that industry may not suffer in that country, even if they are pulling out. Yeah.
Okay, clear. Yeah.
So when they come up with ways like enabling disadvantaged people to participate, it's becoming an additional, it's becoming value for money, right?
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They have plans for the children. They have plans for the elderly. They have plans for disabled people. And even pregnant women too, they have plans for them. So this brings us to the end of the course.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
I should rather thank you, Ma.
Uh,
I'm stopping the recording.